PowerPoint. There we go. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, wherever it is where you are. This is the CentOS Automotive SIG. This is the July meeting. We meet once a month. We have a couple of housekeeping items. A couple of quick housekeeping items, and then we can dive into the technical status. So housekeeping one is that this past about 2 weeks ago, there was a CentOS Dojo. It is a kind of a quarterly or every 6 months meeting in which all of the CentOS working groups and SIGs like us get together and present status and talk about the things that they're up to. And we had a presentation. It should be the video. If it's not available now, it should be available pretty soon. So keep an eye out for that. Housekeeping item 2 was the office hours. We actually did not have an office hours in June because things were just a little crazy. And I'm wondering, do people miss it? Oh, sorry. I'm wondering if people are missing the office hours, if we should go ahead and book those so we have a meeting cadence every 2 weeks, or if we should hold off for the summer because there are so many people who are out and moving around. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Otherwise, you'll leave it up to me and my coin. Okay, I will flip a coin.
I'm okay with skipping it for the summer.
Sorry?
I'm okay with skipping it for the summer and start again in
Okay.
September.
Okay. That was what I was kind of thinking, is coming back in August or September. I just don't, right now I'm not, with so many people gone, I think that people we just probably wouldn't get that many people at the meeting. So we'll hold off on that. And I thought there was one other housekeeping item that I thought of just a few minutes ago, and now it's completely gone from my head. But if I remember, I'll bring it back up at the end. So let's go ahead and dive into the technical status. And Pierre, do you want to take this over, or should I summarize?
It's been actually very quiet on our side, so I'll let you summarize. I don't think there is much details
Okay.
to provide.
Okay. Primarily, the big news this month is the available of nightly images, and they're having been ported to a new server that has faster downloads. I have not actually tested this myself, but I am looking forward to. There's updated documentation for getting AutoSD running on the RPi 4 specifically. And I know that there's been a lot of work that Pierre has been doing behind the scenes on getting Linux running on Android devices in order to expand our potential hardware availability. And that you might be able to give us a little bit of detail on, if there is any.
Yeah, we looked into that, and the short idea is that we can get a Linux P root, so that's the equivalent of CH root, but on the user space, running pretty quickly and pretty fine on Android devices. But the use case we wanted to do was either building a full image, so in the same way that we're building the Raspberry Pi image, but then doing that on an Android device. And the problem is that the P root is limited by nature, and not all the syscalls are implemented. And for example, the mount syscall is not implemented, and the build tool that we're using, OS build, actually requires to mount the file system when it's configuring it, when it's creating it. So we can't build images on the Android. The second issue we've had was building. The second use case we had was about building RPMs, and the problem we have here is when building so RPM goes into different phases, and you do the pre-build, then you have the install, you have the build, and you have the install. So that's equivalent of the configure, make, and then make install. And at the end, it's going to wrap all the files that were built and installed, and put them back into the archive of the final binary RPM. And apparently, we are running into issues with CPIO. which is used to generate the final binary RPM. And we're not quite sure what the approach there is. But the way we looked at it was basically, chances are that this could be an Android kernel bug. Chances are, if we root the Android device, we may be able to get more debugging information and figure out what that bug is. But once we have the bug, even if we're able to fix it, because we have a couple of kernel engineers on our at hand, what are the chances that we actually are able to push the fix back to the Android kernel, and what are the chances that the Android devices that we are running will get the bug fix? So the roll of dice going, lowering the possibilities at every roll, we ended up saying that it's probably the gain is probably not worth the effort. So we actually stopped this experiment. It's pretty fun. It's pretty quickly to do. The bulk of the work was done by Eric, who is in the call here. He has a very nice and easy Bash script that you can install on your Android device, and you can easily get a Linux CS root. So you can do things like make, you can compile an applications on the Android device. But for the two use case that we were looking for, building images and building RPM, this is not getting it for us. So we've parked that for now.
Oh, it's disappointing, but I'm glad it was a really interesting experiment. So, moving on. These are the bullet points from the last meeting. We have encrypted images now with Lutz. Linux firmware has been reduced. You can actually use the Raspberry Pi as a USB gadget now on Windows. I don't remember exactly what the deal was with that.
It also works on macOS actually. It's the mechanism by which you can create a network over USB by plugging the Raspberry Pi, by powering the Raspberry Pi on the USB-C and plugging that on your laptop, and then a dedicated network is get created between the client, the laptop, and the Raspberry Pi, so that if you're in a very network constrained environment where you can't add a device to the network like this, or if you're nowhere near Wi-Fi or network cable, you can actually just power the Raspberry Pi over USB-C, and then using the gadget, the Linux gadgets feature, we can create a dedicated network, and then you can SSH to the Pi over the USB cable. So that's pretty fun to do.
Okay, that's right. I've done that with Arduinos and stuff in the past.
And we do have nightly images for the gadgets as well. So if you're looking to play with the Raspberry Pi, it's really as easy as downloading the image, flashing it, and then you have a couple of configuration steps to do on Windows. On Mac, we are not fully there yet because we are still missing. There is one piece of network configuration that we haven't figured out yet. But if someone wants to take a shot at it, it would be nice. Basically, we are able, from the Mac, we're able to go to the Pi, and from the Pi, go to the Mac, but the Pi cannot access the internet through the Mac. That we can do on Linux, we can do on Windows, but we haven't figured out the right network configuration, either on the Pi or on the Mac to let the Mac route packets to the internet for the Pi.
Okay.
So if someone has more experience with Mac OS network configuration and wants to take a stab at it, that will be most welcome. Otherwise, we'll keep digging on that.
Okay. Also, I suppose this is actually all we've got for today. So I think we have a few minutes. We could take a look at the new image name server here. The image server. It is very fast. So these are all of the images, the nightly builds. Okay, see from the info.
Yeah, it's the most unfortunate that we saw this in alphabetical order, because for once the letters is is at the very bottom of the letter, and nightly folders are at the very bottom of the page. And, it's a lot of scrolling down to do.
Yeah. At least they're here. And there we go. Hubert says we can clean it up. So, alrighty. Well, thank you, Pierre. It is only quarter after. We are essentially at the open discussion point right now. One thing I can mention about is upcoming events that CentOS itself will not necessarily be there, but the Red Hat Automotive team will, and would be happy to talk about CentOS, the Automotive SIG at these. Probably the biggest one coming up is the ELISA Fall Workshop, which is the September 18th and 19th in Manchester. And that is following the Open Source Summit Europe, which is happening the previous week in Dublin. See if I can remember all these off the top of my head. Probably not easy. Sorry?
Will you be there?
Unfortunately, I will not be traveling, but I will be there in spirit. And I will be thinking of everybody drinking really good, whatever it is that they drink in Dublin, and having a good time.
Guinness is a safe bait.
Yes, but there are other options.
There are. I remember going to the Bushmills facility once when I was there. It was quite nice. Jameson, yes. I'm not keeping close enough eye on it. I just saw that Hubert was talking about pushing the timestamp builds into their own directory, leaving the top level directory cleaner for the builds. That was a good idea. There was an alcohol-free Guinness several years ago. I don't think it.
Oh, I wasn't suggesting that, actually. I guess I'm tempted to bring up something. I don't have anything to present, but I just to elaborate on the work that Pierre was summarizing there. You know, a lot of this was the goal here was that the CentOS and RHEL and Fedora, all of these are essentially self-hosted environments for development. So to remind, one of the reasons we wanted to explore these different ways of getting compile and sort of develop environments running is because you have to run, you know, most of the things that are of interest or people are targeting in the automotive space run ARM. And there's not, you know, there's only so many ways that you can run ARM. It's dominant on phones, which is why we experimented with, well, is there a way that we can just sort of piggyback on the phone that everyone has? And as Pierre pointed out, that had some challenges. Until recently, almost anyone could get a Pi, although now they are scarce like everything else because of the chip shortage. But we all hope that will change. And I think that work is really interesting that it's panned out. It is looking very promising that if you don't have easy access to ARM in any other way, you can eventually get a Pi, and you can plug it into an existing developer workstation and use it as sort of an accelerator, an adjunct. Another thing I've been doing, and again, I'm sorry, I should probably be prepared to demo this, and we might even add it to some of the things we're producing on the SIG, but it turns out that both the M1 Max and the Windows ecosystem provide ways to run these sort of conventional workstation OSs on ARM. So there is Windows for ARM as well, and as people probably know, the latest Macs are. And both of them have easy access to virtualization environments where you can essentially run the SIG images unmodified if you wish. So, and these turn out, I mean, they're more expensive, but they're not prohibitively expensive. It's not the same cost, you know, it's not greater than 10,000 euros or USD that you might have to pay for a server machine. And they do provide a pretty nice development environment and don't have any of the challenges of something like running on a phone. So something to be aware of as well.
So you're going to bring that up and not demo it? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm saying I should have demoed it, and maybe I could demo it. It's pretty straightforward. But I'll also point out, you can, for reasons people have speculated on, Windows for ARM hasn't really taken off yet, and so you can get some of that hardware pretty inexpensively, and it does run Hyper-V, which is Windows virtualization. And Hyper-V integration with Linux is actually an example of where Microsoft has become the opposite of what they once were to the open source community. The para-virtualized drivers to optimize running guests inside of Hyper-V were developed by Microsoft in the upstream Linux kernel, and they work just great. So you can run a very fast, capable development virtual machine. And we're even facilitating that with some of our potential customers on the Red Hat in-vehicle OS side of things. So just a plug for all of those things. Go buy a Windows machine, said the Red Hat guy, to the surprise of many.
I do have on my to-do list to write to write something in the documentation for the SIGs on how to run our images, the AutoOS images on macOS. It shouldn't be a very big problem, and most of it will work just fine out of the box.
Can you not just run QEMU on a Mac?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that's what it's actually pretty easy to do.
Okay. I have not touched a Mac since the days when they were square, little cubicle devices. So it's been a while.
Maybe they still are.
Probably. All right, the little bitty ones. So okay. Well, I'm glad to open up the discussion. If anybody has anything that they want to bring up to the SIG, any questions, any issues, anything that you've run into while you've been playing with things?
Hi, this is Vortis here.
Hello.
Yep, I think we just joined, or my team is also there, Liz. We are from Tatrexi, and based on a discussion with Red Hat yesterday, we got this invite and we just joined. So basically, just a quick introduction. We are an embedded company, and we mostly work on the automotive space, embedded development on different boards like the RCAR, Quectel, Qualcomm, and embedded RS-850, vehicle processor, different vehicle processors. One question, I mean, just absorbing all the things, but just one question I had is, from a vehicle interface perspective, if you are using Pi, a board like Pi 4, how is it envisioned? Because that will be a core component to be able to show to OEMs or deploy in an automotive. How we can interface with the CAN or other vehicle networks, some IP or other networks.
So I can take a stab at that. I don't think none of the platforms that we've talked about here are necessarily targeted at being able to do sort of hill level testing. This was honestly more about giving people a place to do initial compilation, unit testing, mocked out testing, and whatnot. I did not imagine, I mean, I'm sure there are many people who would be thrilled if the actual sort of industrial version of the Pi was used in a vehicle, but I don't know of anyone who's actually contemplating that as an in-vehicle platform. So this is more of a development platform. Having said that, I know that there are ways to get CAN interfaces on the Pi and some of these other platforms for testing. It's a common way. It's a common platform for people to use to actually log CAN bus if they're trying to learn how their vehicle works. So,
Yeah.
but again, I wouldn't expect that to be. I wouldn't expect that to happen in a production context, at least not yet.
Okay. So this is, you're looking at from a ease of development point of view. Initially start with Pi and then move to one of the automotive boards, I guess. Okay.
Yes, we were talking. This is more about how to do it, since other operating systems in this space are built around cross compilation. So people are familiar with the Yocto project and automotive grade Linux, which is a derivative of that. The development environments can be x86, and then you only need to use target hardware or the target architecture when you deploy. And that's not the case here. We have a software stack that has been validated by building ARM software on an ARM CPU, because we inherit from a server operating system where that's possible. So,
okay, understood. it could be good to evaluate automotive, I mean low cost automotive boards too.
Mhm.
In addition to Pi, like the Quectel we see for two-wheelers, and all being used. It's cheaper. I mean, comparatively cheaper than say an Qualcomm or an Arcar board, but of course more costly than Pi, Raspberry Pi.
Right.
But that could also be another starting point at some point, where then we could check the integration, the CAN controller or other peripherals that come in an automotive. That could also be tested on the OS.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that'd be great. I think our challenge for most of this SIG was chartered in the midst of the chip crisis, and it has been very hard. It's been challenging for us even to get access to the reference hardware that is relevant to some of our customer interactions. So, but could you put the names of those platforms in the chat so that we get them correctly? Because I think we have talked at a few others of these that it would be nice to have reference images that work on other auto reference platforms, because right now we don't really have many. Maybe Jeffro could even get it, or someone could get it in the notes.
I will definitely do that.
I will try to put what I know, but maybe next meeting we'll try to see a specific board.
Yeah,
I'll just put the general names that I know. Liz or others can add on.
It gets into another area of focus that we've had, and I think is another thing that this SIG could be helpful for, is that another thing that comes from the Yocto open embedded automotive grade Linux environment, and even some of the commercial RTOS, is the notion that each piece of hardware is uniquely enabled for the operating system, which is also not common to the way that Fedora and RHEL work. It's something that we're having to adapt to, and something we'd like to eventually eliminate the need for through standardization, which is something that Red Hat was involved with on the server side, and we're starting to grapple with now in Edge and Automotive. So
yeah, there's a number of standardization efforts. Quectel I'm not familiar with. It's interesting. I'm going to note these down so that I can make sure they get into the notes. Great. Thank you very much for bringing these up. One thing I have been asked twice in the last 2 weeks is, when are we going to be supporting RISC-V? And people probably noticed my RISC-V cup. I worked on the RISC-V project for years. The answer to that, as is the answer with a lot of things, is as soon as there's hardware available, I'm sure that we will think about addressing it. Hardware availability is nobody knows what it's going to be like over the next year or two. So we're going to do what we can. The whole purpose for picking the Raspberry Pi as the kind of core platform here was its availability and inexpensive. The fact that it was accessible to everybody, and that we didn't expect it to be used in a car. I think it'd be great to do some CAN bus testing with the CAN hat. I don't know what the availability is on that either. I haven't looked recently.
And I mean, we could, since this is a live topic of conversation, we could like the thing I've always struggled with that is, unless you connect it to your own vehicle or a vehicle you have access to, is just what exactly are you talking CAN to, and what are you proving by doing that? So most people I know who have explored it further basically get multiple Pis and some other device to talk to each other over a CAN bus. And I think it highlights one of the challenges we have more generally here, is there's no, we were talking about this in a meeting earlier today, that in server architecture and software deployment, we have the idea of a stage environment, which is, it very closely matches what it is that you're eventually going to deploy. And it's very difficult to do that in an automobile, is what we're hearing more and more, that the number of full up test beds is pretty limited in a lot of cases. So.
I was just checking. I had a memory that there was an OBD2 hat or at least some kind of an interface
Mm,
specifically for the Raspberry Pi. And there is a project called OBD Pi. So that would, I believe, it would at least give some of the data that streams across the CAN bus, engine telemetry and things like that. So it might be fun to play with at some point. Somebody, I don't want to be responsible for smoke coming out of anybody's car in any capacity. So certainly can't suggest it, but I think it'd be really cool to do. Maybe we could get funding to like buy an old car.
We talked about it.
Yeah, or a new car. That would be even better.
It's just, again, this SIG and this program were also chartered during a period of historically high used car costs as well. So.
That's true.
Let's start a hardware-oriented project during a supply chain
That's right.
crisis for both electronics and vehicles.
Well, I'm afraid that's probably my fault. I have a knack of being on the wrong side of history with things like that. Yes,
It's an
Eric.
exciting time.
Actually, one thing that is very useful with the Raspberry Pi, other than the CAN, it's in a lot of the other ARM boards, various stacks can be quite proprietary. For example, I know from working with camera stacks, if you want to get an automotive like MIPI CSI camera running using open source drivers and components, you only really have two options at present, which is Raspberry Pi or a Rock chip board. So it can be useful for things like that as well, because when you're looking in those sort of areas, a VM isn't so suitable because it's hard to talk directly to the hardware, and the ARM ecosystem, a lot of those components are very proprietary. So that's something personally I find Raspberry Pi kind of useful for.
Yeah, for sure. Do you run across any other hardware that might be suitable? I mean, one board that we've talked about, I think, before that comes up is the Beagle board.
The what?
The Beagle board.
BeagleBone, yeah.
Beagle bones.
I tend to focus a lot on the cameras at the moment. Rock chip has good upstream support.
Right.
That's the only other one I'm aware of. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Google's first ARM-based Chromebooks. Originally, their first ones were Rock chip because they had a very open culture and it was just easier to work with, basically. But yeah.
Adam, I'm not familiar with Craig Smith and Open Garages, but it sounds fascinating. I'm going to look that up. Our Hacker's Handbook, huh? Definitely some good reading.
I'll try and find the link. There's a YouTube video of him setting up. Just basically, he went to the junkyard, got the ECU, got the dash, and the wiring harness, and that's all. You know, a couple of the sensors and everything like that as well. But just it walks you through how to do it with just basic stuff from the junkyard, and all the CAN sniffing he's doing is on Linux as well. So,
Okay. In a junkyard, even.
If I can find that video, I'll link it to you. It's off of YouTube.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it really does. Especially, with a junkyard, because that totally would fit into my budget. My lack of a budget. Very cool. Nice. Well, unless anybody's got anything else, I might just give people back most of half an hour. Oh, great. Thank you.
I'll briefly report that Fedora IoT AR64 runs under x86 64 hosts with EDK to AR64. So if you're, if you want to show that your builds can at least boot, you don't get a lot of peripherals, but it's there.
We should do a demo of all of these different methods at some point. We will plan to do that next month for the August meeting, which I should have at my fingertips, but I do not. I believe it's these meetings are on the first Wednesday, so I believe we're looking at August 3rd. I just went past it. Yes, August 3rd in this time slot will be the next SIG meeting. As we covered earlier, we will be suspending the office hours over the summer, as there's a lot of people are skipping. Pierre won't be there in August, sadly, probably off windsurfing or doing something exciting like that, I hope. Fishing, maybe?
Something like that.
Good. Okay. Excellent.
Pierre is going to be exploring the junkyards of Europe,
I think
searching
so.
for automotive hardware, is my understanding.
I'm sorry, sir. Do you have a Raspberry Pi in your junkyard?
This reminds me of Mad Max somehow. Just we're like going to be the Mad Max of automotive electronics.
Or a cable TV channel.
Yes.
Which Mad Max?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Yeah, well, on that note, give one last call for any questions or comments or anything anybody would like to toss out. Otherwise, we will wrap it up for the month. And not seeing anybody unmuting or anything, we'll go ahead and wrap up. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming. This has been a really good discussion. I will get the video and some minutes up over the next day or so. And we will see you all next month. And be sure to chime in on the mailing list or on the chat channel. There's a chat channel on Element. There's a link from the actual page for the SIG. And we'll talk to you all then. So have a great week.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.